God changes us, sometimes unwelcomed. Let's admit it. I wasn't expecting that, especially when we view something that's going on that's negative. And maybe we learn the lesson, we're like, okay, we got through that, better person for it. But then we immediately want to put everything back the way it was. Like, okay, that God moment's over, now let's go back to the everyday, And that what happens, I don't know if any of you have ever been on some type of day of reflection or a retreat or something like that. You're so into the moment, you're so excited, you learn so much, and you have great speakers, and you just feel filled. And then when you get back home to the ordinary, then somehow that, I like to call it a Jesus high, you can give it the name that you want, that warm and fuzzy feeling or whatever, it just sorts to, it's like it kind of leaks, it seeps out. And then perhaps by Monday, for some of us, or by Wednesday, Friday, you're like, oh, it just kind of went away, it's all gone. And it's almost like a letdown. One of the reasons for this may be that when we are looking for God, seeking God, searching, we look for it in big signs and wonders, right? It's going to happen to me in this big grand occasion when I go on a retreat. When, for those of us that maybe come to adoration, sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament, or maybe when you're reading Scripture, or maybe just having a really great talk with an old friend that you haven't talked to in a long time, and we look for it in that big stuff. But really, it happens in the ordinary. God is a living God. He's everywhere. I mean, yeah, He's way up there, but He's also right in here. And so anywhere you turn, right, left, up, down, there He is. What I want to share with you tonight is what I consider to be some ordinary moments for me that turned out to be absolutely extraordinary and life-changing. So what I'm going to tell you about are 4 instances where, when I wasn't looking, God revealed Himself. Okay? It didn't happen while I was reading Scripture. It didn't happen during Mass. Well, these particular ones. I'm not saying it never. Just these ones. These ones. That's Southern, I think. Tennessee born. Where was I going with this? Oh, it didn't happen on retreat. Or on a pilgrimage. When did it happen? It happened on a business trip. It happened going to Kohl's to take advantage of a sale. It happened driving home from work in traffic. Okay, the stuff that hopefully we all have a little bit in common. Shopping, working, stuck in traffic, going on a trip. The first experience that I'm going to talk about was back in 2007. Okay, so not that long ago. And I was in Washington, D.C. in February. One of my programs at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta won this very prestigious award from the U.S. Secretary of Health and the Surgeon General. Innovation in Prevention. We had a diabetes prevention program. I was really excited about it, as you can imagine. And just with my award, this was pretty amazing because the surprise guest was the First Lady. At the time was Laura Bush. And to personally thank us for what we do and making a contribution to society, I'm like, wow, this is a really big deal. I work in pediatrics. I'm a dietitian. I teach nutrition. I just do what I do. And it was kind of nice to receive those accolades. Thousands of people. The lights and the cameras are on. I'm standing up here with this award and having a smile. And I look out into the crowd, and there were no familiar faces. There was not one person from my life that was there. And so as I'm standing here smiling, I'm thinking, I feel really lonely. Like, when you're so excited about something, you just want to turn and go, yeah. Well, I couldn't do that. I get to do it later, but, there's that enthusiasm in the moment. So I'm standing there, and I'm just like, wow, like the coolest thing that's happened, and I feel a little alone. And then I hear God interiorly say to me, I see you, and I'm proud of you. And I was like, now's not the time to cry. Because, when God kind of comes upon you, I don't know about you, but I just tear. And so I'm like, okay, I've got makeup on, I'm all dressed up, the television's right there, and the photographer's all like, no crying, no crying. His tears are welling up in my eyes. I'm like, okay, not a problem. We're going to suck this up, we're going to smile, and which I did. And then I'm just thinking all the while, you know what? This is the afternoon. Tonight, my friend Kim, who I graduated with from the nutrition program, is driving up from West Virginia. Her and her husband and their little kids, and they're going to take me out and we're going to celebrate. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be it. So that was keeping me going. But here's where the shoe drops. They didn't show up. They didn't call. I got stood up. I had to just walk a couple of blocks down the street to a pub, just to go have dinner out instead of, room service, alone again. It's like, nope, don't want to be alone, so I go there. Giving you lots of details so you'll see the contrast in just a few minutes. And so I walk in, and of course there's lots of people, and they're having fun and laughter, and I go up to maybe get a seat, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, there's all these people here with their friends, having a good time celebrating. I don't want to watch that, because where's mine, So I decided, let me just order dinner to take out, and I start walking back to the hotel a couple of blocks. Now, it's probably below 50 degrees outside, and because of my fit of anger leaving abruptly, I didn't have a coat. Sorry. So I'm kind of in a hurry to get back. And as I come out and I walk in, the first thing that I see is a man begging for money. Okay, and he's talking to a couple, a man and a woman. And I look at that and I have my food and I'm like, I am not in the mood. So I decided to go this way across the street. I'm a very loving person, I promise. But I had a day, So I thought, I'm just going to go across the street that way, walk down, completely avoid him entirely, and then cut back over. I don't care that it's 40-something degrees. So as I start to go, something just kind of stops me in my tracks. And I look at him again. There's that inside voice, the one that said, I see you and I'm proud of you. He didn't say, I see you and I'm not proud. But he did say, go ask him how he's doing. I saw him here with my food, and I'm like, I'm having a meltdown, I'm having a nervous breakdown, I'm hearing things, I don't know what thing's going on. And then I was like, going to ignore it and continue, and again, something stopped me, and it's like, go ask him how he's doing. And I was like, okay, fine, if that's what it takes. So here's me and my meal, walking down, and I'm just going to get a little bit closer. By this time, the couple he was talking to, is gone. And he's by himself, and he's actually walking away, and I'm thinking, cool, I can get out of it. He's walking away, I don't have to ask him how he's doing. Excellent. And then suddenly, for some reason, he stops and drops something. I'm like, oh. So I just walk up, and I was like, hey, how you doing? Just like that, I swear. And he stops, and he looks at me, and his face lights up, and he says, well, hi, how you doing? Now, this is a tall black man in like army green, okay? And he looks at me and he's like, well, I'm doing good. How are you? And I was like, well, I've just got dinner to go and I'm just heading back to the hotel or whatever. And he's like, oh, he says, all right, well, I hope you have a good night. And then, I'm wanting to go, but then I'm like, we already have the encounter. So I was like, well, what are you doing here? I don't know that I meant here in D.C., but that's what he proceeded to tell me. So, his name is William. William is a veteran. He's a younger fellow. I'm not really good with age, but I'm going to say late 20s, early 30s. And he's going to get back home, which is in Virginia, which is where he comes from. And I get the feeling it had been a long time since he had been home. And he likes hunting. Came up in conversation. He's a carpenter. I found that suspicious. And, all right, so you know some carpenters, I take it. Okay. And he tells me, he's like, yeah, he says, so I'm just trying to get back home. He goes, I just can't wait to get back, and to do his hobbies and stuff. And I'm like, well, that's great. And I'm like, well, so what's this? What's going on here? I said, why don't you go to a shelter? I mean, this is dumb me. Why don't you just go to a shelter? What I didn't know was, in the D.C. area, you have to have an ID card. That you're a homeless person from that area. And I guess that's to make sure that you're not going to have, addictions, violence, and other issues that maybe that homeless shelter can't handle. So he can't go to a shelter. I said, get out of here. You mean you're not welcome in a shelter? I'm thinking, oh, my goodness. It never dawned on me. I was like, well, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I'm just trying to get money so that I can get a room for the night. Because, of course, he's moving on. He's not staying in D.C. So I was like, okay. I was like, all right. So I reached in my wallet trying to think, God, what do I got? And I had like, I don't know, $9.50. What was left over from my to-go dinner. And so I gave it to him. So then he says, well, what are you doing here? Just like that. I figured he was just going to be on his way. He got a 9. And actually, I forgot to tell you, he got so excited over $9.50. You would think it was Christmas. Like, wow! And I guess if you got a styrofoam cup and people are just tossing in coins, that's a lot. And I was like, whoa, okay. I'm so glad I made you happy. Somebody's having a good night. And so he says to me, he says, well, what brings you here? And so then I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell him. I was like, well, I'm a dietitian. He's like, what's that? So I tell him what I do for a living, and I tell him about the trip and the award. And I mean, literally, he listened and hung on every word that I said. And he was just so intently, and his face just kept glowing and getting all smiley and happy. He's like, you must be so proud, and like your family. He goes, that's just awesome. And then I'm like, well, yeah, it was a really big day, you know? And he was just so excited for me. And guys, I got to tell you that exchange with William that night, right when it happened, was a very healing experience for me. Because I was feeling a little sorry for myself on a day that I thought was supposed to be here, and it ended up down here, according to my perception. And then here was a complete stranger, you know, who asked me about my day, and I got to tell him. It was like so excited. Compared to the standing O that I got from the thousands of people I didn't know, to this one individual person giving me the attention that I needed and wanted, and perhaps, you know, from family and friends who just couldn't share in that moment, I got from William. And it's like, my heart was like kind of healed. Because I got to tell you, the whole time I'm standing out there, I didn't even notice it was 40 degrees outside. I didn't care that my food was getting cold. You know, and here he's listening to me, I listened to him. We had this amazing like interpersonal exchange, and we gave each other something that we needed, you know. And it was just, I don't know, it was just kind of amazing. So I'm like, all right, well, we both, you know, said our goodbyes and parted our ways. And the crazy thing is, and I'm not saying what actually happened, but as I get down to about a block, I turn around to look. There's no William. I'm like, he said Carpenter, right? And I'm like, couldn't be. That's only on those programs on TV. So I go into my hotel room, and I realized that during this whole time, I wasn't sad and I wasn't angry. I didn't feel abandoned, rejected, alone, and all that other pity party that I had going on. When I was focused on him, there was nothing wrong with me. You know? And so when I think about tying this back to the reading that we had, the first reading from Acts, where it talks about communal living, you can interpret that obviously in a number of ways. How I'm going to relate it to what happened here was where it says they have all things in common. William and I, different from different places, we're different ages, different backgrounds, shared something in common that night. You know? And the funny thing is, God had me give to him the very thing that I needed. Because what I needed was attention. I didn't get it the way I wanted, or the way I expected, right? But I gave him attention. I went up and asked him how he's doing. That's how the whole thing started. It was not my idea. And then William gave me attention that was more valuable than all the applause and attention that I got in that big break room. Cool, huh? And it was an ordinary moment, a business trip. But it doesn't stop there. So I go back into the hotel room, and I'm all excited. And I'm like, oh man, that was really great. And I'm feeling good about myself. I gave him $9.50. And I'm getting ready to eat my now cold food, and this time I still don't care, and I plop down on the bed in my room by myself, and I hear a voice again. And the voice was not, I see you, I'm proud of you. The voice was, that's it? That's all you did? I'm like, what? And it was, William needed like another $16 for a room that night. So here I am getting ready to pray, ask God to bless the food. He's like, wouldn't let me. He's like, well, wait a minute. He's like, yeah, okay, you did something, but you fell short. So then I'm like, oh, do you really need to burst my bubble? I'm kind of feeling good right now. But it made me think about that, and I thought about it, and I was like, well, what I could have done was allow William to walk with me to the hotel, which has an ATM in the lobby. I easily could have pulled out a couple of 20s. you know, but I didn't. And then I reflected, well, why didn't I do that? What would people think if I brought in a homeless person off the street with me into the lobby of this big fancy hotel that has all these important people staying there? You know? So I don't know. I was so caught up in the moment of what had happened, I just didn't think to the next step. So what happened was great. It was a great encounter. God taught me a wonderful lesson. I learned about, you know, charity, compassion, and how God uses the weak to lead the strong. Because I was considering me a strong person. I mean, I win an award, I must be strong at something. And then you have someone who maybe appears to be weak, but he had more strength and character that night than I did. And then I worried all night. Oh my gosh, did he find a place to stay? Did he get enough money? Is he under an exit ramp? Like, what's, because it's like 40 degrees and dropping. So I was like, oh. And then, you know, so there was a lesson to be learned there. And then when I get home the next day, I get in Atlanta later afternoon. Our Renew group was meeting. I was in a Renew group with Amber. And we were meeting, and I'm a little bit late because I'm coming from the airport. And so when I walk into her house, like everyone that's sitting around turns and looks at me and they'll go, Christina will know. And I'm like, huh? And they asked me this question. I can't remember exactly what we were studying in the Renew group, but it was something to the effect of false piety. They didn't understand in the context of the chapter. And I was like, oh, do I have a story for you? Let me tell you a little bit about false piety. It was me feeling really good and puffed up about what I did for William. It was really William that did something for me. And then, you know, I gave him a little instead of what I was capable of. But I was satisfied with what I had done. And then God's like, I'm just going to stretch you because you're capable of more. So my little lesson was a great reflection for the group and was just very tiny. And I'm like, okay, like you so orchestrated that. I just walked right into your loving web. Now, in my second example of ordinary is 1 year later. So this is 2008. And I'm on another business trip. So this was in Chicago. Again, to a cold place. I didn't realize how cold it was in October. Didn't have a jacket again. I've learned since then. So as I'm turning the corner, I see a homeless man. So I'm like, God, I got this. So I say to my friend Sarah, I was like, does he see that guy over there? She's like, yeah. I said, let's bring him dinner. She's like, what? I was like, let's just bring him dinner. I was like, I'm just going to order like the most expensive thing on the menu. All right? And then we're going to give it to him. So she's like, thinking Christina has lost her mind, but sure, whatever. So we go in the restaurant, and we order dinner, and I don't know, whatever I had lobster, because you know that usually has a high price tag. And it was just an enormous food. And actually, if you could put label on gluttony, it was that night. And so I asked the waiter, I was like, can I get a to-go box? He's like, I just brought the food. I'm like, well, A, dietitians do that, but B, I'm going to give this food to the guy I saw on the street corner. He's like, oh, that was really cool. Like the waiter was like so excited. He goes, that's awesome. He goes, let me bring you a whole thing of bread. I'm like, excellent. So I'm like, okay, I see how God's like multiplying the generosity here, which is really pretty good. And then Sarah's like, oh, here, I can feel some asparagus. Let me give it to him. So there's this, it was such a meal that you were like, he's going to be so happy. So then I'm thinking, well, gosh, I hope he's there because, you know, dinner took longer than I expected. I'm like, well, I hope he's still there because I'm going to have to go all this away because I don't have a refrigerator. Well, anyways, he moved down just a little bit, but he was still on the way back to the hotel. So I walk up to him, and I was like, hey, I was like, what's your name? He's thinking, you're approaching me with a little too much enthusiasm. But I learned my lesson. I'm giving to the needy, you know. And so I go up to him, and I was like, hey, what's your name? And he just kind of paused, looked at me, and I was like, okay, what's your name? And he's like, Henry. Henry talked a little slow. And I was like, well, hey, Henry, I'm Christina. I was like, how you doing? Because I thought that was something that you should ask people when you meet them, especially if they live on the street. Hey, how you doing? So I asked him, he goes, oh, I'm doing pretty good. I was like, well, listen, Henry, I said, my friend and I just finished dinner. We have all this food left over. Would you like to have it? Henry's like, well, what is it? So I was like, well, Henry, I was like, it's lobster. Have you ever had lobster? He looks at me like, no. I was like, well, it's seafood. I said, so you need to eat it today. Don't be saving it for the next few days. I said, I'm a dietitian, food safety is my thing. If you're not going to be able to eat this in the next couple hours, I'm not going to give it to you. So this is me being trusting. He's like, I'm going to eat it in the next few hours. So I give it to him, and he's very, very humbly gracious or whatever, and not really knowing what the heck lobster is, but it smelled pretty good. And so he takes it, and he immediately, like darts away. I'm like, what is he doing? I mean, not that I needed a hug or something, or, like a lavish thank you, but I was just like, well, he's hurrying on pretty fast. And what happened was Henry turned and went down one of the streets to the end of the next block, where there's another homeless man. Okay? And he immediately is like this. And then I'm like, whoa! And so he gave it to him, or shared his food, and I looked at that, and I'm like, Sarah, check that out. She's like, oh, that's really nice. And we're both like, cool, And that instance, though, reminded me very strikingly of the gospel reading that we heard today, with the widow and the 2 coins. Okay, where Jesus is sitting in the treasury, all kind of people throwing stuff in, lobster, asparagus, very expensive stuff. And then, Henry comes along, and he gives all that he has, that meal. That was just given him. He couldn't wait to give it away, to share. So here I am feeling good about feeling good about myself. I ordered lobster for the guy, and he's got all this food and a whole bunch of bread. And, but I gave him my excess, didn't I? I gave leftovers. Now, I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back, because I'm human. I had the forethought, I intentionally did that for him. So I went with the purpose of giving. That was my thought of charity. I learned about God's charity. You give of your need, not of your excess. Henry humbled me in a big way. Really big way. My heart transformed once again. I learned about God's charity. Okay? It's more than what you expect. In a surprising way. And what I saw that night was just beautiful. Now we're into 2009, and I'm driving home from work from Children's, which is on 85. So if you know anything about 85 traffic in the afternoon, like after 4, it's not pleasant. Just like to thank God for air conditioning. And I get off the exit at right off of like Cumberland and like the Cobb Parkway and Spring Road, because that's the way I go home. I live in Austell. So I'm coming off the exit, and I'm making a right on the Cobb Parkway to make a left on Spring Road. This is important so you can visually figure out what I'm talking about. And I like to get in the left lane, because everybody's all trying to figure out what lane they're going to get into and dart over in the last minute. I just don't have the patience for it at the end of the day. It makes me less Christian. So I'm in that left lane, and y'all know that there's a median right there. Or if you don't know, I'm telling you, there's a median between the opposite sides of traffic. And there's a man standing there begging for money. I'm like, God, am I like a target for people that need money now? Seriously? You say yes, and he'll be like, okay, here you go. I pull up, and I roll down my window, and I'm like, call him over now. And so he walks over, and he just kind of pauses for a second, kind of like, all right. He wasn't expecting a conversation. I'm like, what's your name? And he's like, Joey. I was like, Joey, I asked your name because I want to pray for you. But the gist is, Joey's a veteran as well. And he's actually collecting money not just for himself. Apparently it's really difficult for veterans to get custom-made prosthetic limbs. But Joey has diabetes, he's got all these problems, and I go into dietitian mode. Well, Joey, you're checking your blood sugars? I was like, all right, I'm going to give you whatever I have, but honestly, I don't carry cash. I'm like debit card queen, because I rack up points and stuff, right? So I was like, all right, here we go. And I might have had $5. I was like, it's all yours. And I was like, God, I wish I had more, but the multiplication of the fish and the loaves, bam, make it happen. Okay? All right, Joey, well, good luck with that. And he's like, well, what's your name? I was like, oh, thank you. My name's Christina. And he got all excited because he has a friend named Christina. I'm like, oh, she's awesome. It's a great name. And he's like, well, Christina, how can I pray for you? I was like, oh. I was like, well, I go, pray for my health. I have health issues too. Wish I could tell you about it, but I got to go. And we said goodbye, rolled up my window, and I'm on my way. The fruits of that encounter, I didn't really until middle or late August. In 2009, I was sick and didn't really know exactly what was wrong. Had been to different doctors, diagnosis, and ended up having major surgery and I had to work for 6 months. But after several years, I know why. And so I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute. That guy, I prayed for his health. He prayed for mine. I did for him what I needed, and he did for me what he needed. And God helped both of us through each other. God's type of charity, the way he loves us, is not in the receiving, but the giving part. And you've probably heard this a lot. Oh, it's in the giving that you receive. If we all give the very thing that we need, all of our needs will be met. Because we all have things in common. With William in Washington, D.C., I needed attention that night. God asked me to give it first. He didn't say, okay, I'm going to do this for you, and then you do this for me. No, I had to give first. And I gave what I needed. So I'm going to Kohl's, and I'm in the parking lot. And the parking lot, I mean, it's not like at closing time, so it's probably like maybe 8 o'clock. I think they're open until 9 or 10 or something. But the parking lot's kind of full with cars, because I think everyone is using that coupon that's about to expire. So I'm mildly irritated that I have to park far away, because I wanted to get in and get out, because I hadn't had dinner yet. And so I get out of my car. I hadn't even shut the door to my car yet. And there's an, excuse me, miss. I'm like, I'm in a hurry. I'm thinking to myself. And she's like, I'm sorry to trouble you, but, my name is blah, blah, blah. I was like, I didn't hear a word you said. And she's asking for money. Gave me this long story, and it actually is a heartbreaking story. I don't know if it's real, if it's a scam. And maybe that's not really even the point. But she's needed money for a place to stay. And I'm like, my head's screaming, remember William and how you worried about him? You better give her something. So I'm like, okay, God, I got you now. I've learned she can have it all. I said, whatever's in my wallet, I had no idea what was in my wallet. And I'm thinking there's probably not that much because I told you I'm a debit queen, so I figured it's not that much. Well, I opened up my wallet, and I'm like, oh, dang. Didn't remember going to the ATM. Now, there's 2 20s in there. Now, I'm not stingy, but I'm not money bags either. I live on a budget. So I was like, you tricked me. Okay, God, I love you. So I was like, okay, miss, calm down. Because I actually wanted her to shut up at this point so I could give her the money and just get into the store and go spend some more. And so I was like, all right, I said, I want to help you out. I've got 2 20s that I'm going to give you, and I'm praying over it right now. I'm asking God to multiply it to meet your needs. Because she told me that she needs $42. And I'm like, well, I'm falling a little bit short, but here you go. Oh my gosh, you would have think that she won the clearinghouse sweepstakes. She was literally doing a little dance and jumped up. She started crying. So I'm like, well, clearly this is not a scam unless she's a mental patient, because she was just like going crazy. She hugged me. I was like, okay, now you're a stranger in my personal space. She's hugging me. She's like, oh. And she looked up to heaven, like threw her arms up in the air. I mean, again, you think it was a television show. And she's like, thank you, God, for this woman and your generosity, your abundance, and you always come through for us. And I ask you to bless her tenfold. And I was like, yeah, God, I actually like that. Thank you very much. This is me being honest with you. So she does that, and I was like, and she's all huggy, and I'm like, okay, well, good luck. And I'm about to dart in really quick into Kohl's, and I see her go to a lane over, and there's another guy, this poor, unassuming guy getting out of his car, and I'm like, oh, she's going to scare him to death. So I just paused for a second out of curiosity, and she goes up to him and gives him the same story and stuff, and he's just looking at her like, what are you doing? He's probably in there getting something as well. And so he opens his wallet, and he's like, look, I'm sorry, all I got is $2. Oh my gosh, the woman just started doing the dance, and she was like, oh, hallelujah, and just all this stuff. And then the look in his face was just like, he's thinking, why is she that excited over $2? And I was thinking, wow, because I could hear the yelling and the screaming, thank you, Lord, thank you, Jesus. And she had what she needed for that night, right there. And I was just like, think my face was like glowing with this big goofy smile. And I was like, wow. I was like, that's just absolutely amazing. I was like, the woman got exactly what she needed. And I was like, I don't know, there was something inside me that got all like goofy, kind of like, God, you were so cool, you know? Like, you met her need with two complete strangers. Now, he had no idea what was going on. He didn't know that she just got 40 bucks. She just needed 2 more, you know, because I don't think he was patient for the whole story like I was. But he was just astounded. And when I'm thinking about it right now, I'm like, well, you know what? I did receive in that moment. I got paid tenfold. It just wasn't this. But it was just something you can't put a price on. And I was just completely blown away. I'm just like, wow. It's like the scriptures come to life because it is the living word. In just everyday, ordinary circumstances. I just wanted to share with you the ordinary stuff. God does signs and wonders, absolutely. Sometimes they're like flare guns shooting off, and then other times they're very quiet. On a business trip, or on your way home from traffic. In the book of Matthew, where it says, you know, blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Who comforted them? Community. And in fact, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. But notice you were merciful first, and you got it back. You know, the person who has more doesn't have too much. And the person who has less doesn't have too little. Because we're all giving from our need, and all of our needs are being met. That, my friends, is the communal life. That is the love of God. That is his compassion, his charity. And I'm like, so if we all did it, it would totally work. Well, what happens? You know, a couple people don't participate in them. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. It's love. Jesus says the second is like it. You shall love your neighbors yourself. I'm my biggest critic. I can tell you everything's wrong with my hair, my clothes. Sometimes friends will point it out to you. If you're that close, they'll be like, yeah, I want to love, and I think I'm loving my neighbor pretty good. Thought I loved William pretty good. $9.60 didn't cut it. You know? But it's just because I still got to learn how to love myself. I got to get comfortable with my imperfections. But not focusing on self, though. Because remember, to feel good and to be healed, you have to turn it outward and focus on others. So what we have to do, I believe, is to give of our need. And that's how we're going to be healed. So again, if you need it, you got to give it. If you need attention, give attention. If you need a hug, give a hug. If you need money, give money. I know it doesn't make sense in the material world, but that's God's logic. If you need an apology, give one. Because if we're doing these things, we're also giving a living example. Because if no one ever says, I'm sorry, how do you learn to say, I'm sorry? No one ever shows you love. How do you ever learn how to love someone else? You know? So that's the wisdom that comes from above, that I've learned in my humility. And I hope that you found this inspirational. And I was a little nervous sharing some of these things with you guys. But that's the strength and love and compassion that I've learned from God in the ordinary things. So, blessed are the poor. We truly are, because we all have our own poverty. I have a poverty of patience. Still learning that one. We all have our own poverties. It might be poverty in finance. It might be poverty in love. You want that special someone. You know, poverty of organizational skills, whatever it might be. But don't run from it. Don't be ashamed of it. But don't focus on your imperfections and that. Just focus on God's love and give what you need, and you're going to get it. I believe. Thank you very much for your attention.